and that is desktop. I'm going to go desktop. Right, so how do I get here? So there we are. So you will have been sent this, but I'm just going to go through it because we're going to. This is the first page of the worksheet. But I'm just for this part, we're just going to be talking about this first area here. I'm just going to have to move my. I've got some things in the way of my of this screen. Oh gosh, I can't see my. Oh, this is always going to happen. There we are. Just move my face. My face is in the way. Right. So for this task, we're going to be asking you to collect a series of objects. I've got some here. If you have a look here, I've actually, because I'm going to be having a go at this alongside with you, and I've got lots and lots of little bits there that I've dug out yesterday, and I'm going to do the workshop alongside. But what I want you to do is just follow this first little part, and then whilst I'm doing my version of this workshop, I'm going to ask you to collect your things, and you can kind of be collecting them as I'm talking. So yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to find some objects, and we're going to ask you to look at the shape and the form of the object. So some of the things I've got, I like this. This is a tripod for a camera. This has got quite interesting shapes that I can bend. That'll be quite good for some kind of letter that I make. I've got my watch because I like really unusual watches, and my wife bought me this watch. You have to sort of decode how it works. So anyway, so that's a little part of me which I'm going to add to my word. What else have I got? I've got a little bird carving there. So I really like my wildlife. So they're interesting shapes, and that's what I want you to find. Things that have got interesting shapes, but also just things that are like, I've got matches there, I've got some stones that I've collected, I've got all sorts of bits and bobs. So what I want you to also think about when you're doing this first task is the scale. So you might want to work like me. I'm going to be working on my table here. So I've just got a very small area. This is probably as small as you want to go. You can work on an A3 piece of paper or on a clear table, or if you had much bigger area and much bigger objects, you could work on the floor if you cleared a space on the carpet or on some floorboards or something like that. Another thing I'd like you to do is to just to have a look at some letter forms. So I'll go through some in a second. And so if you can see from here, it's got the two G's on the third bullet point, and they're two different types of G. One is a humanist G, and one is a geometric G, and one will be used more in books, and one will be used more on web usually. But that's not a rule, but that's just to show you the difference in them. But I love the letter G because it's got those two really interesting shapes. So you could, if your name starts with F or something like that, there's a couple of different Fs as well. You've got the lowercase, the uppercase, you've got the one that goes below the line and then line through it. So you could think about that. Yes, and I want you to try and think a little bit differently. So, you know, what I'm trying to look for is something slightly surprising. What I really love is something when someone does something really unexpected. So you could think about perspective, you could think about negative space, which is rather than creating the shape of the letter, you could create the outline of the shape of the letter, so that the space in between creates the letter. Or you could utilize the architecture in your room. So if you've got a specific piece of architecture, you could lean something against your wall, and then you could have something else. And then I'll show you what I mean in a second in the presentation, but that's called anamorphic. Hi.
Jamie, just to stop you just for a moment. Some people are saying that they can't see the slides. Sometimes it might be a case of clicking, or sometimes there's the option to look at the slides, or they might need to click on to unpin your video as a way of being able to see the slides. I can see the slides, but for some people they can't. So they might need to just play around with Zoom just to make sure that they've got the formatting there.
Cool. I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll wait until you've got that sorted before I move on, because the next part's a little bit more important. Cool. So maybe it might be because I'm in full screen. Let's have a look. What about if I'm like that? Go back about a million. Is that sorted or?
Just checking. Yeah, now working. Perfect.
Brilliant.
As you were.
Yeah. So yeah, this is just so that you can now see. I've just taken that top, the yellow part there, and I've just blown it up. So that's the bit that you're going to be focusing on this. And the 4 images that I've shown in here are actually from one of my first year students on graphics, and they've created these whilst in lockdown actually, which is really cool because he's just got on with work and he's just done a letter every day almost. And he's made it out of, like the R is about toilet rolls. So he, you know, when the whole toilet roll crisis came out, he made that out of toilet roll. And then he's got Smarties, and he's just bitten a fox's biscuit to make a G, that G that I was talking about. So so that's a really simple version of creating a letter form. But for this first task, which you're going to be getting on with after I've got to this, whilst I'm getting on with my talk, you're going to be getting on with it. But for the next probably 4 minutes or something, I'm just going to go through the logistics of it. So this is just to show you the wide variety of typography, really. So a lot of people don't realise that there's so much variety in letter forms. And if you look at that Y in the left-hand side, it's got really, really thin, they're called hairline areas. And then you've got these really, really bold stems. The G there has got a tail, so it actually looks like a tail, and it flicks round, and they call that the tail. And weirdly, with the G, the little bit at the top is actually called an ear, which is quite funny. And then in the bottom right, on where it says type, you've got this blocky E. That's called a slab serif. So yeah, you've got sans serif in the middle. You've got 4 different weights of sans serif there. So you can make really thin letters, or you can make really fat letters like the 18th. Yeah, and then also other unusual characters. So look at the 2 different ampersands you've got here. So these are called ampersands. I'm sure you've used them or seen them quite a lot, but the variety in ampersands. So they're on the left, they're like sans serif. They haven't, well, they're not. They're more of a kind of slab serif because they've got that slabby block bit there. And on the right hand side, the ampersand is more of a humanist style, almost like calligraphy. So and also numbers as well. You could look at numbers if you've got a particular number you want to look at. That R is really lovely. Bottom right hand side is a really lovely R. So yeah, that's just to show you all the different kinds of letters that you can get. This is the simplest form of what you could get on with, really. And I would like you to explore this a little bit, but this is just something fun to do. And actually, it's a really lovely way. This is obviously something to do with Christmas. And someone's made a whole font out of Christmas. Lovely kind of Christmas card. You know, if you were to write messages in this, like Merry Christmas in that would be really lovely as an idea for a card. But it's also just really simple because, you know, if you look at that half a snowflake, which is the D, on its own, it doesn't look like a D. But when you see it in line with all the letters, it actually creates this really interesting effect where it looks like a D and the J looks like a J, and even the U, you would just think it's just a mince pie, but with all the other letters, it makes it obvious what you're looking at. But this is the slightly more complicated version, and this is what I'm going to try and attempt later. I've challenged myself to not think too much about it, so it will be it'll be just as difficult for me as it will be for you. But this is where you start to create more of an image out of your objects. So you can try either of these 2 ways. You could maybe do a couple of letters in this kind of form, or you could look at creating more of a larger image out of lots of different bits and bobs. So whilst you're going to head off and collect your things, or if you've already got a selection of objects, then I'm just going to go through and I'm going to have a little go at this myself. And I'm going to be brave and turn on my camera. Where is it? How do I do this? Stop share. So you probably will have to pin me now, actually. 1 second. I'm just going to find something to lean my computer up on. It's got some matchsticks here. Good. So I can't actually see where. I'm going to go back to Zoom. There we are. So what I'm going to do is you're just going to see my hands for a bit. I might try and do it so that it, there we are, so that it faces you, which is going to make it extra difficult for me. So just for a couple of minutes, probably a little bit more than a couple of minutes, I'm going to do one of these, and then I'll show you what it looks like when I pick the computer up so you can see it properly. And then whilst I'm doing this, you can collect a lot of objects. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the objects as well, because I've tried to find slightly meaningful objects. And one of my first things that I got into that got me interested in the visual world was photography. My granddad taught me photography, so I'm using a camera, and I've loved photography for my whole life, pretty much. And it got me into composition, and it got me into kind of looking at things around me, because I try to find quite unusual photos of things. So that got me slightly more interested in this. I'm going to try and make an N, I think, because I've just seen this and that could work quite well. N for NUA, which is obviously where I work. So this is also, obviously, like I said earlier, this is part of a tripod. This is actually a carving that, so I'm really interested in carving as well. This is a little bird that I made for my wife. It was supposed to be I don't know if you'll know your birds very well, but it's supposed to be a blue tip, and it was definitely a failure. It does not look anything like a blue tip. But so there we go. Another piece of wood, because I'm interested in woodwork. I also, this is quite an unusual thing, but a lot of designers do this. They collect things, and I'm always collecting stones, and I collect quite a lot of different things. I also collect these little, the little hats that you get on Innocent Smoothie. I'll talk about them in a minute, actually, because they're quite interesting. Cool. So I'm just trying to create that first, the part of the end, but what I want to do is I want to get a kind of serif, actually, because that would be really cool. So the serif is the little blocky bit that comes out on the bottom of an N. So what does that look like? Oh, I put some. I'm quite into poker, and I'm quite into like kind of the silly gambling games as well. So I'm going to put some little dice in there. So I'm making this slightly personal, actually, which you don't have to do, not for this task anyway. Go. Again, I'm into wildlife, so this is another thing that I used to photograph quite a lot, and I still do, actually. I still go out and photograph things, and we went to Africa last year, and we tried to find a rhino, but they're so rare now that we didn't, so I bought one instead. So that's my cheating way of seeing the rhino. So I think that looks pretty much like the bottom of an N. It's got that kind of shape. What else have I got here? So again, with the stones, I collect these stones everywhere I go, but I really love round stones as well. It's being interested, I think, actually. This is the thing that a lot of designers and artists have in common, is they're always they're just very interested in visual things, and one of my things is obviously stones. It's quite an unusual one, but so I play the guitar as well. Another kind of thing that just in a lot of studios that I've worked in, they have a lot of kind of instruments lying around, and it's a bit like a kind of art studio. But so this is my little nod to that. I've got my little plectrums that will go in there. I want to start creating the other part over here, which is a little bit. Can you see over here? Moving this rubbish out of the way. So I'm going to start creating the other part of it here. So this weird little object was when I was a designer in London. I decided that I wanted to leave London, but I didn't want to leave design, and I wondered how I could kind of get out of London and then still be a freelance designer. But because you get paid less, I needed a really cheap place to live. So we ended up living on a boat for quite a while, and this is our little pin that we had in there. So that was our little tiller pin that went on the back of the boat. Another thing that I collect, really, this is really strange, this thing. Another just weird visual thing, that this is actually a padlock. So what you do is you put this, the key in the bum of the dog, and then it opens up. It's a very strange little thing. But I just saw this in an antique shop, and I thought, oh, that's so strange. I just love all these really weird little objects. So that's going to go in there, definitely. Another little carving. You know, I'm really into my wood carving. So they're not strictly graphic design, really, these things, but it's just something that I find interesting. When I was in Africa, this is sort of quite interesting, because it's a bit like what happens when you have an unusual client. Because I've worked with a lot of clients, like things like Toblerone and Coca-Cola and stuff like that when I was a designer, and but one of the things that you get asked to do very unusual things as a designer all the time. They'll say, "Can you make us a warm blue?" And you can't make blue warm, so they'll give you really weird requests. And I gave this designer, this woodworker in Africa, a really unusual request, because a lot of people get these hippos, because we did see some hippos when we were there, and they usually write the Swahili word for hippo on there. But we didn't want the word for hippo, so we wanted to put this on our toilet. So we got the Swahili word for toilet. And the designer who was, you know, the woodworker who was working on this, he kind of looked at us really strange and was like, "Why do you want a toilet on a hippo?" We just thought that was quite funny. So create that. I'm gonna start. See, I do talk a lot. Another little bit of wood carving. That I didn't do that. That was a friend of mine. Quite like old coins. I collect loads of stuff, really. A little nod to my job. So I do a lot of digital work. Nearly everything I do is digital. I was a packaging designer when I was in London, and I really love packaging. Not like standard boring packaging. I love really, really interesting packaging. And I really like these tiny little, these are some of the hottest powders, apparently. And I've chili powders. And I've got these tiny, tiny little pots, because you only need really, really small pots. I'm going to put them in there. Again, this was such a good marketing idea for Innocence Movies. They created these, you know, they got, I'm sure you've seen these. They get little old women and little old men in care homes and various different places to knit these hats. And I collect them because I just think they're fantastic. And then they put them on top of the lids. Really good. It gives a good message, you know, what their brand is about. My cat as well. My cat has been everywhere with me. So I take, you know, he's lived in London. He's lived in Norwich twice. He's lived on a boat. I'm not going to put my watch in there. Got another little hat. I'm a climber, so I do that. I don't know if you've ever done climbing before. I'm not an extreme climber. I just do a little bit of indoor climbing every now and again. I really love wildlife, so I've got a little feather in there. For the birds. Actually, that might be a crisis that happens, because my cats are outrageous, and they do come in and out of the house quite a lot, and I might have to jump up and take a bird off them. For some reason, the last couple of days they've brought a couple of birds in. They don't do it very often at all, but so that might be a crisis for me. Another little carving. So you can probably start to see the shape. Maybe you can't, but I love traveling as well, so I've got a little euro. I'm going to put that in there. What else have I got? Now, strangely, I know I've got matchsticks, and this seems like a bit of a cheat because I can just kind of create the shape here. But when I was 18, I went to a festival, and I used to make these geometric patterns out of matchsticks, and I didn't really think anything of them. But one person saw me doing it, and he came over to me and he said, "Oh, are you a graphic designer?" And I said, "I don't know what a graphic designer is." And that was the first time I'd ever heard of graphic design, was when I made these, I used to make kind of stars and all sorts of stuff, patterns. And so the first thing I did when I got home is I went to the library, because there wasn't great internet then. And I just went and had a look at what a graphic designer was. And then I started designing some posters. So weirdly, matchsticks were the kind of starting point for me for graphic design. Music as well. Went back in the 90s, I used to paint on my walls. My mum did not like it at all. But what I used to paint lots of logos from different bands that I like. So I was into Metallica. I know that Metallica is still around. I don't really listen to them anymore, but I loved their logo. I don't know if you've seen it, but I really, really liked their logo. And so I used to draw it on my wall. And my mum came in once and looked up at my wall and said, "What on earth have you done?" I'd drawn these huge letters all over my wall. So that's my first bit of typography that I got into. And I used to draw various other things. I'll show you in the presentation in a minute, actually. I really like miniature things. I love these little pegs. They're really fun. And they're really good filler. So that is pretty much an end. What else have I got? Now, this isn't a pencil. I couldn't find the pencil, but I have a pencil somewhere in this house that I've had since I was 13. I'm now 37. I'm actually 37 today. And I have a pencil somewhere that I lent to a student last year. And when I thought about it, I went, I think I've had this pencil since high school. And then I realized, and I went and asked the student, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I don't know where I've put that." And I was like, "You have to find it. It's the most important pencil in the world." But yeah, so I've had a pencil for over 20 years. Bart Simpson, that's how I lived my life when I was a kid. I was only really into art and maths I really liked, which that's probably why I went into graphic design, because a lot of graphic design is about mathematical art. So it's quite, I don't have to work any maths out, but it's sort of got a structure to it. It's less conceptual. But yeah, so that's my little nod to me when I was a kid. I was a bit naughty, and but I really loved Bart Simpson. He was like a role model to me. So yeah, so that is probably. Let's have a look. I don't know if it's easy to see. Oh, now I've seen it the wrong way up. It's not the best thing in the world, but this is my N. Oh gosh, on it. So that is my N. I think that's the right way around. It's the wrong way around for me. But so yeah, so that's sort of what we want you to be doing whilst I'm talking to you. So I'm going to go through now. Hopefully you will have collected a bunch of things. I'm just going to move all of these. See, this is the sad bit. Now I just have to destroy it, and I just move them all to the side. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen again. And 1 second. Share screen. Great. So hopefully you'll be able to see this. Yeah. Can you see that, Tom? Is that okay?
That's perfect.
Great. So what I'm going to do, whilst I'm getting on with this, as you can probably see at the bottom, you could, if you want to have a go at this and then send some stuff through, then we can have a chat about it halfway through, and I can have a look at what you've been up to. And it'd be really great to see what you do. And it doesn't have to be amazing. It doesn't have to be well thought out. You know, mine was just really kind of clubbing things together. But it's just really about being creative and having a go and doing something that you've possibly not done before. So I'm just going to go through and explain what part that typography plays in all of these different roles at the top. So I'm a graphic designer. I was a graphic designer. I'm still a graphic designer. But I've worked in a lot of these areas. So I've worked with photography. I've worked in packaging and publishing, advertising, a little tiny bit of film and a bit of games. So I've worked across some of these, but what I want to show you is that actually typography plays a huge part in almost every art form. And also there are lots of jobs in which people don't realize there are lots of jobs throughout all of these industries. So this first one is obviously art. This was a student of ours from NUA. He's a graduate called Amir. And he graduated from graphic communications, where he learned about branding and identities and campaigns. But what he took from it was a real way of marketing himself. So he's created these lovely images, and he's now actually more of a gallery artist. So he sells paintings now, and it's really good because a lot of people don't realize you can actually make a living from this. And people think that you have to be Jeff Koons or someone like that, Tracy Emin, and earn millions. But this person doesn't earn millions, but he earns enough to, have a house, and, he earns a career from it. So really interesting. He's obviously very talented at this as well. But also, art doesn't have to be like a kind of a thing you can buy. This piece of work here was around when I was a student, and I had this in my research quite often. And strangely enough, this still pops up in my students' research now. So I still see people bringing this up. But what it says, obviously, is obsessions make my life worse and my work better, which is a really interesting saying. But the scale of this and this project, it will have taken a long, long time for this artist to create this. And it's just one image. So he's just took an image and taken an image, and this has lasted for over 15 years. Just, it keeps popping up everywhere. So the awareness that this artist has brought to his work just from taking one photograph, because this will have been destroyed the next day, because it's obviously not supposed to be there, but it was created out of pennies. And what he has done obsessively, as he says in his last thing, in the actual saying, is he's obsessively gone through and made them all a tint. So he's found like the darkest one, the second darkest, the second lightest, and the lightest. And then he's got 4 different tones. So when you look back on this image, you can see, especially in the typography, you can see the different shadows that it makes. If you look at worse and the S in there, you can see that it almost looks 3-dimensional. And that's from him obsessively going through and categorizing each one. And then it just gets swept up the next day. And he's obviously got a grid that he's created on his computer, and then he's made them like that. So it's a fantastic piece of work. This is actually a place that I used to work, not D&AD. This is the head office of D&AD, but this was Turner Duckworth, and I worked here in my first job in London. And they create branding and identities and a lot of packaging. And they've worked on the new Burger King and all sorts of stuff like this, and Coca-Cola mostly. But they also did this really interesting front of the D&AD head office, and this is called Anamorphic Typography. And they got this really, really great agency called the Bread Collective, and I would suggest writing their name down, having a look at, if you're interested in the arts, have a look at their work, because they do some really interesting work, and they paint all over the front of buildings. I've worked with them in the past as well. I didn't work on this one, but this, when you turn from the right angle, it creates the D&AD logo, and that's called anamorphic typography. So if you're walking down the street, it would look quite unusual, and then at a certain specific moment, it all just comes together, and it looks like it's sort of floating in the air. Fantastic bit of design, that. So that is how an artist can create a living. So the artists, Bread Collective, they're a group of artists that have come together and collaborated to work with agencies like the agency I work with, Turner Duckworth, and the Turner Duckworth have come up with a concept, and then they've created the concept for them. So that's how they would work. Illustration. So a lot of people think illustrators are just artists, but actually illustration is a slightly different discipline. And illustration tends to work on a slightly more commercial basis. So they're commissioned by somebody like Philip Pullman to create a lovely book cover. And you might have seen this book cover, but we had the artist come in, and he came and gave a talk this year, and he showed us all of these prints that he's created. But on the left, what he's done is he's carved out of wood. It's called wood block. And he's carved it out almost like you would with lino, if you've worked with lino in the past. And he's created this image with the woodwork. And then he's printed that onto a piece of paper, scanned it in, and then in the middle here, he's taken it into Photoshop and he's coloured it in. So this is actually the coloured version that he's created. which I really, really love. And it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous print. I have one of his prints in my hallway, actually. And then that gets sent over to the publisher, and the publisher then puts all of these words on it and actually sort of destroys it a little bit. So that's my job. That would be my job, to take the lovely illustration over on the left hand side and then destroy it by putting lots of typography on it. I don't mind it, but I think that they could have handled that a little bit nicer. But so that's how an illustrator would play into a commercial project. But also some illustrators are independent. So we have this person come in as well and give talks at NUA, called Marion Deschars. And she was an illustrator, and she graduated from the Royal College of Art in the 80s. So she's been around a very long time. But there weren't really typographers you could just hire to do things for her. So she just used her handwriting with her paint. And she sort of became known for this. So if you look at the top left, most graphic designers will know immediately that that is Marion Deschars. And also she's almost got fonts that she's created that are part of her identity. So each one of these is part of the book she's made. And but she's got an illustrative style to her photography that she's become known for. So textiles obviously feeds into fashion, and fashion is all about communication. And quite often designers the textile designers will create these incredible tapestries and lovely bits of typography on their prints. It's not always typography, is sort of more rare in this area, but if you look at the one on the right, it's just got really interesting messages and really nice bits of letters, and this sort of you might even see this and not realize that it's typography. And then I would, because I'm always looking for typography. I'm a bit of a geek in that way, but it just makes a really interesting pattern. So that's how that could feed into textiles. But also sometimes it's about getting a message across. So textile designers will have had to create these things. And this is more of the fashion end of textiles, but that's where I'm leading on to. But it's nice to see that people can say something, especially when you've got like Save the World on the left. It's really bold and really, it's almost too big for the t-shirt, and the t-shirt's almost too big for her as well. So it's a really bold, big statement. And then just playing with typography as well on the right hand side. This girls just want to have fundamental rights, playing on that saying, girls just want to have fun, and just changing it slightly and just completely changing the meaning of it. So this is how typography can play in textiles as well. It could be a way of getting a message across. And obviously, we all know about the Black Lives Matter movement that's going on at the moment. Really powerful statements. And if you're walking around town with this, everybody knows what you're saying and what you're standing for. So that's sort of where textiles comes in with typography. But in fashion, our fashion course here is quite well renowned, and but fashion is so much about communications. And you've got the Pharrell, the sneakers on the top left hand side. I'm not the best person at talking about sneakers. It's probably not even the right term. I'm a little bit old for that, but I really, really love the designs. I sort of missed out. All the ones I had were Adidas originals and things like that. But now you can customize your shoes, and the ones on the right, you can actually go onto websites and you can submit your designs, and then your shoes turned up in your own design. Or a lot of people do this. What they've got here is you just literally get white trainers and you draw on them with Sharpies. I think it's just a fantastic evolution of fashion. And the Balenciagas on the bottom left, Balenciaga are always doing these really, really great bits of typography on their work. And I love their shoes. They're not something I would wear. I'd probably feel a bit silly wearing Balenciagas, but I think most people just buy them because they're like an investment. But yeah, so that's how typography plays part in shoe fashion. But also in the actual way, all fashion has to be shot. So when you're doing the photography shoot, you art direct, and this is something that I've actually worked in. I worked for Ted Baker for a while in London, and I worked on some shoots like this. But the really interesting thing about these 3 images is they are a still image. They're not photoshopped, and you can probably see all the different lines that are holding all the things up. That is stood still. So actually people are standing still in that whole frame there. And it's got the typography is actually hanging from string, which is just amazing. What an amazing thing. So, you know, typography sort of plays a role in the photography of fashion as well, and a really big role, because they're quite often trying to say something with their work. But that leads me on to photography, and so yeah, we've got lots of different kinds of photography. The sort of photography that you might be more aware of would be wildlife photography, which is top left. Very easy win, really, because everybody loves looking at cheetahs chasing things down, and it's a really like a powerful source of photography. But you've also got the kind of photography which is slightly more boring, which I've worked with quite a lot, is food photography, and I've worked with a lot of food photographers in the past, and but every single piece of packaging that you get with food on it has been photographed by somebody. So that is a job that people don't realise is actually a really booming business, especially in London. Then you've got product photography on the bottom left. So all of your cars, your iPhones, every product you buy really has to be photographed. And then sports photography, which is a slightly more difficult role to get into. But if you're a really great photographer, then this is definitely an area that some people make a really great living from, actually. It's a bit tougher, but it's definitely a slightly cooler. You know, the top left and the top bottom right are the ones I'd be most interested in. But also, photography is just about, you know, in terms of what you're doing today, it's really about having the right kind of photography for what you're doing. So these are all pieces of work from my students that from last year and the year before, and these are first year students that they did a similar workshop to this, but it was a day of doing it. And so obviously we won't expect you to make a G out of chip shop forks, but really cool. But what they've done is they've shot it on a really clean background. So they've got 2 pieces of cardboard, they've laid one down, put one behind it, and they've got a slightly nice lighting. It's not professional lighting, but it's pretty good. The one in the middle is that Instagram one that I told you about earlier. And he's just got a really simple, because it's a really simple idea, and it's just simply lit, really simple background. And then the one on the right is actually, I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but they created it with some silver foil, some pink paper, and some marshmallows. So those are marshmallows that are sort of representing the kind of glitz lights that you might get in somewhere like Blackpool or Great Yarmouth or somewhere like that. But the background is really geometric, and they've got these nice angles of how they've created it. So actually the background it's simple, it's not distracting, but they've created almost a space for this typography to sit in. But in photography, quite often, especially my job in photography, would be to make really functional typography. So this would be the things that you read, but in every single gallery you go to, you will see typography on the walls that are explaining the gallery concept, or what's going on, or what more about the artist, or whatever it is. But they'll have had to pick the right typeface for this, the right size, you know, for older people, for the older generation that need slightly bigger typography, but also so that lots of people can stand around it at the same time. These you know, and not kind of have to get too close to have to read it. So this is the role that typography plays in photography. That's a bit of a mouthful. So what I want you to do is I want you to just send some stuff through. If you have done any, that's fine. And if you haven't, that it doesn't matter. But what I would like you to do is when you're making things, just get some pictures, start to send them to, I've got my thing right in the way again, to Norwich Uni Arts or to student recruitment at nua.ac.uk. And then we can have a little look at them when you have. But what have I written down there? I've got a couple of notes which I'm sneakily looking at every now and again. So once you sent some stuff over, we'll have a look at that in a bit. But if you've got any questions as well, just put some questions into the chat feature, and I can answer any questions, even about the course or about the kind of role that I had in London, or what my students get on with, or any of the things that we've talked about, really. But what I want to do as well is I want to introduce activity 2. If there are no questions, are there no questions, Tom? Or
not just yet, Jamie. But there's one that I think makes NUA quite different, and it's about the graphics pathways at Norwich, because obviously Norwich has 4 graphics pathways. Could you just give us a little overview of those?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So the 4 pathways under the graphics kind of courses at NUA are graphic design, which would be more things like, I'm just going to grab an object quickly, 1 second. So this would be a classic kind of thing that you might end up designing on graphic design. This is something that I actually got for my birthday this morning, but it's a really lovely piece of packaging, and it's just really clean. I don't know if you can see the kind of frosted glass, really lovely color schemes. So this is the kind of thing that you might be working on graphic design, but you also work on brands and identities, and you work across different campaigns and posters, and a little bit of typography. And that's sort of a little bit about that course. You've got graphic communications, which is a little bit more campaign led. So you've got quite a lot of the projects are a little bit more social. So they might be museums, they might be an issue. So it could be like Black Lives Matter. It could be that would be your project, and then you'd see what you could do with that I don't want to call it a brand, but that thing you could see if you could do some kind of social media campaign with a bit of an idea. But they're all 4 courses are about ideas, really, which I'll talk about a little bit more. But so you might also work on a little bits of publishing and some really great advertising. So it's also got a lot more of an emotion side to it. So you create quite a lot of your graphics, you will end up making it move. So some of the social media campaigns that you see at the moment, all of them are animation. So there's a little bit more animation in that course. Design for publishing is a little bit what it sounds like, really. It would be books, but it would also be online books. There's also some identity stuff in there, because if you've got a book, you want to sell a book, so you've got to almost package it to make it look attractive. It's also going to have lots of ideas. This course is a little bit more about your expression. So they nurture, if you're a bit more of an artist or an illustrator, then they would nurture that side of you. So it's less about what the client wants and a little bit more about what your expression of that project is. But you could be working on anything from the Harry Potter series to a kind of the works of Shakespeare or something like that. But also it might be about online typography. So this is a really typography plays a really large part in the publishing course, which I'll get to actually in a bit. But it's more about the kind of layout of your typography and the functional typography side. And then UX design is a new course that we've just introduced this year. And this is one I'm really excited about, because UX design is user experience design. And it's all about the kind of whole user experience. So when you've got say you've got your new iPhone or your new Android phone, you want to be able to open it and understand what's going on. So if I was to pick mine up, I want to pick it up and I want to get to the I don't know, my messages really, really easily. So it's just about making the whole process of working through digital technology really simple, and it's a lot more digital based. But it's really about making digital solutions for product design. But it's quite new for us, and it's probably the fastest growing industry at the moment, UX design. So there's lots and lots of jobs out there, and most of them will be on web design or on app design or something like that. So yeah, so that's a little bit about that. Yeah, cool. So shall I move on? Is that?
Yeah, I think we can move on for now. And if anyone has any questions, please just pop them into the chat, and we'll look to answer them a bit later on. Okay.
Great.
Thanks, Jamie.
Cool. Cheers. So the next part of this, what I would like you to do is, I'm sort of rushing you through, because I want you to feel a little bit of pressure, because I don't ever like, I always say this to my students, is stress isn't a good thing. So we never want you to be stressed out, but we do like a little bit of pressure. So quite often, you know, even with me creating that N earlier, I felt a little bit under pressure. I was like, right, I need to get this, it needs to look really good. I'm the lecturer. I have to make this look good. So there was even I put pressure on myself, but if you know, I don't want it to be stressful. But what I want you to do now is look at your letter that you've just created, and you've probably got sort of a lot of random objects together. But now, a little bit like I did earlier, I want you to make it slightly more personal. So it might be that actually I really love wood carving. So maybe this is one of my objects. So I want to tell people that I love wood carving, but I also want to tell people I love drawing as well. So I might create an A here. So it's quite an abstract A, but I'm creating an A out of that object, those two objects. And that's a really simple way. Actually, to tell the story in a simple way is a lot, usually a lot more successful than if you made it much more complicated. So I might just then move on to make, I might even just do A, B, and C. So if I get my B ready, I've got 2 stones because I collect lots of stones. I'm also, I love the natural world, so I'm always, you know, I'm always going out and collecting things from nature. So this is a little bit more about my design life as well. So this is a scalpel. This is one of the most used objects as a designer, and it's actually one of the things that pretty much set me apart from other placements, because I got really excited about cutting my work out. And I know it sounds a bit geeky, but when I left university, I was pretty good with a scalpel. And one of the things you do as a placement is you end up doing a lot of the kind of odd jobs. So I was the odd jobs man, but they expected me to not be very good with a scalpel, and I was actually okay. So I think that contributed to me getting a job in London. So I'm going to use that. And again, yeah, so this is a bit of a cheat, but I'm going to create a C, a little bit of a C with this. And I'm going to turn that and create my C. So now what I have is I have my A, B, and C, which, oh gosh, my thing, there we are. So A, B, C. So I want you to challenge yourself to try and make your typography that you're going to create a little bit more personal. So how can you tell me a little bit about yourself through the objects that you're choosing? So it just becomes a little bit more of an idea-based project. So that is stage 2, task 2. So what else have I said? Have I missed anything out there? No, I think that's about right. Good. So architecture. So we have a really good architecture course at NUA, and architecture, a lot of people think it's just about creating a building, but actually it's quite often about creating the fascia, or the face of the building as well. So this is a really, it seems like a really extravagant piece of design all over this building, but actually this is a functional piece of design. So this is, instead of having lots of sheets with lots of holes in to make the building cooler, because it shades it slightly, they've gone, well, actually holes are a little bit boring, let's do something interesting here. And they've cut out lots of symbols and typography and all sorts of various shapes to make it just that little bit more intriguing. And so that's how typography can play a role in architecture. But also architects do get really fun projects every now and again. And I know I live in Norwich, and I know if I saw this, I would be over the moon. I'd probably be getting buses everywhere, because what a fantastic piece of design. And this is actually a bus stop somewhere. And you can, whilst you're waiting for the bus, you can lie down like that guy on the right-hand side. Or you can even, if you're feeling brave, climb up into the top counter hole of the B and sit up there. Just a wonderful piece of design, and it makes people smile. And that's the sort of exciting, fun jobs that an architect will get to work on outside of a building they're designing. And this is interior design. So this is an area that I probably know the least about, but I'd love to work on these kind of projects. And this is actually from a design company in London called Cartilage Levine. And we're probably going to get these guys in this year to come and give a talk, just because they create what is called super graphics. And it's something that, it's a new term. It's only been around for about 7 or 8 years or something. But it's huge graphics that are functional. And so on the top left there that you're on floor 3. And same with the Switch House I don't know if you've been to the Tate in London, but the Switch House on the top right there, that's the newer building of the Tate Modern. And that tells you what floor you're on straight away. But also these bottom images here on the right, they're from the same building. So you've got a really functional bit of typography, and it shows you what floor you're on. It shows you what the structure of that kind of floor is like. And then the design museum, just really, really big graphics. I'd love to work on a project like that. So really interesting, really lovely bit of typography. But another area of is vinyls as well. So this is might be Amsterdam. I'm not actually sure. But this is huge graphics that tell you exactly what you're headed towards. So rather than having lots of tiny little signs showing you where to go, you know that the subways are in that direction. You know that tickets are in that direction, and the buses and taxis. So when you're walking around, you just know straight away where you are and where things are. You don't have to ask anybody. Really functional, really bold typography. So branding is a big world. This is where I thought that I would end up working for my whole career, really, because I love logos and I love identities. But the brand of isn't just a logo. So you'll know from Apple that when you buy an Apple phone, it's an expensive thing to buy. So what they've done is they've made their head office on the left there, they've made that really expensive. It's almost like a cathedral, a glass cathedral. They don't mind that it looks expensive, because they know their products are expensive and people trust the company for that. That's part of their branding. They're simple shops as well, all part of their branding. They want it to look really, really simple, but also expensive. They want it to feel appropriately expensive. And I know that seems strange for a company to want that, but that's just part of their image. And even the box, which we've got on the bottom right here, even the box, that feels like an expensive object. When you pick, I don't know if you've ever unboxed one, but when you lift it up, it fits so perfectly that the air doesn't escape properly, and it just kind of slides out really, really smoothly. It's very satisfying. So that is all part of the Apple image that they've put together. And Amazon as well. So Amazon is a brand that I've worked on. When in my first job, my creative director created the Amazon logo. And what a lot of people don't realize, they know it's a smile, but they don't realize it's also A to Z. So they started off as selling books, and it created a kind of the A to Z of books. So that is a really clever little logo that they created. But then they get to do these really fun things with the boxes as well. So when the delivery men are carrying them, it looks like they're smiling. But typography, these are a lot of the companies that we work with at NUA. So some of these you'll know, some of them you won't, but some of them are huge companies. I know that we've got the Click, which you might not know, but they're one of the best design agencies in the world. So a Hat Trick as well, the V&A. But all of these have in common is, what most of them have in common is great typography. And all logos have to say something. They usually have to say what they're called. And so the typography has to be designed by a designer. Packaging, this is a really great piece of packaging by JKR, another agency that we get to come in, and they come and give a really great talk on all of their projects that they're working on. And what you'll notice here is the ugly, I don't know if you've seen this can before, but the U in ugly looks like a tongue, and it's just kind of sticking its tongue out. It's a little bit of a rebellious brand, but they've created icons and illustrations for this brand as well. But typography is a huge part in the packaging world. I work, like I said, I've worked in the packaging world, and you know, you've got Oatly in the bottom left, really interesting, really great tone of voice. You've got these really fun fusilli and linguini macaronis in the top left. Really lovely bits of typography, but it's just fun and interesting, and that's the kind of message they want to pull across. Publishing, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's all about typography and layouts. But sometimes it's about using the typography to enhance your layout. So if you see in the bottom right, you've got that K, and they've cut through the page to make the kind of slice of that makes the rest of the design look really good. And then you've got the reflections in the left-hand side. It's quite reflective of the typography, a really unusual way of doing layout. And you're splitting images up on the right-hand side, so they're talking about two different people in that article, so they've sliced them in a really interesting way, and then they've got really functional type on the top right. So that's, you know, this is probably the area that typography plays the biggest part in. Same with this as well. These are all David Pearson's lovely covers. So David Pearson's one of the most prolific book cover designers, and he comes in and gives a workshop every now and again, at least once a year. He's a good friend of mine as well. So, but he is a really fantastic designer. You know, he's very famous in the design world, which it's like saying very famous in some other industry that you won't know them, but I definitely will. But he's created these lovely bits of typography, and he worked with Penguin quite a lot as well. So he comes and gives some talks. And advertising, it's all about the message. So I remember when these came out in London, and it was a bit odd because I really loved the poster, but I didn't really like the message, because what they were essentially saying was that new fares have arrived and the fares are going up essentially. But look at that, isn't that great? You know, you've got the bus at the top that says new, you've got the DLR, you've got the overground, the underground. Yeah, these are fantastic little bits of design, but every element of this will have had to have been designed. So the concept will have been in a design agency or in an advertising company. The typography will have had to be created by somebody, and then they will have had to be created as 3D visuals as well. So that is that they're all different job roles that you can get as a designer or an animator or as a 3D modeler or as an advertising copywriter. Another piece of advertising, I haven't put all of them on here, but I just wanted to show how this project you're doing today would be relevant to the design industry. So you can create, they've essentially created the word run out of things that you might associate with running. So you've even got the kind of the drainage lid on the left hand side, but you've also got the soles of shoes. And they did a whole series of these, some for walk, some for run, one for swim, and they're all really great images, and they would have had to have been designed, conceptualized, and 3D rendered by somebody as well. So all jobs that you can get in the design industry. And film is another area that most people don't realize. You watch films and you don't realize how much has gone into the design of these things. So we have this person, Stuart Craig, come in and give talks at NUA as well. And he is the set designer on Harry Potter. And so you'll all have seen Harry Potter films, well, most likely anyway. But every single element, he said that when he came and gave a talk, he said that all of the elements had to be designed by a graphic designer. So he had to work really closely with graphic designers to make sure that the tone of the imagery was right for his set. So all of especially in the Weasleys, Wizards, I can't remember what the shop's called, but you know, everything in that shop had to be designed by a designer. None of them you don't see a Coca-Cola can in there. They've all been created by a designer. So that's a job that if I went back in the design industry now, I'd love a job like that. I'd be emailing Stuart Craig and asking if he has any jobs for me. But where I started to get really into typography was in the credit design. So when I first saw this, and I know this might not seem that great now, but they've never changed it. You know, this is Star Wars. You know immediately that it's Star Wars, and they've never changed it because it still works, and it's still a really great way of telling the beginning of their story for each film. So yeah, so that is one of my first exposures to typography. But animation as well. We've had the set designer come in as well and give a talk to the graphics students about Isle of Dogs, which is a Wes Anderson film, which if you haven't seen, you've got to go and have a look at it. This is a stop motion, a really ambitious stop motion film. And all of the things in this have been designed, and he brought them all in. He brought lots of little objects. So he didn't bring any dogs or anything in, which I was a bit sad about. But he brought all of the tiny little pieces of packaging in, all of the tiny little newspapers, everything that had to be put in the film was brought in. So he brought loads of objects for us to see, and he gave a really great and interesting talk on design in film, in animation. And what I've got, hopefully this will work for you. It's just a really short animation. It's part of the intro to the Spider-Man animation film. But just showing you what I want you to look out for is all the different bits of type in there and all the different treatments of type. These have all been created by a designer or an animator. So I'm just going to play that film quickly. Great. So that is, I think it's a fantastic piece of design. I think Marvel were also an area that I got slightly interested. I wasn't quite as into it as a lot of my friends, but I did love a good Marvel comic when I was a kid, and it's sort of come back round now. And the typography in those old comics is fantastic. So yeah, games design as well. This is something that I grew up on, computer games. I haven't got not many anymore anyway. But I love this Horizon Zero Dawn typography. But also, this is what I was talking about, UX design as well. So someone had to design the layouts and where all the icons go and how big the type has to be, how big, it has to be functional. So this is all really functional typography within a game. And so every single thing that you're touching really these days has been designed by somebody. So it's just worth just keeping an eye out for that. This is a game that I created when I worked at Ted Baker in London. And I created this little logo in the bottom left called Soulmate. And it was for a window design. I haven't got the window design on here actually, but it was for Valentine's Day. So I created this little icon. If you see in the top left, that's a soul fish and it's the heart, but it looks like a heart. So I kind of made soulfish, soulmate, made it slightly fun and interesting, and then created this nice pattern. But the game, you actually fish out your deals. So if you get really good at the game, you catch more deals essentially. But if you see in the app design, it's got hook your soulmate in there as well, and then it's got two little hooks, a little bit like the soulmate there. It's just nice little touches of ideas within typography as well. So that is just a little bit of my stuff in there as well. But this is one of the last slides as well, but where I really, really got into typography was back in the 80s when Super Mario Brothers came out. I said about drawing Metallica, logos on my walls and stuff, but the first thing I drew on my wall was the Super Mario Brothers logo. And I tried to make it all square and all pixely like it is in the program. In the film. But it's just great to see the evolution of it. So in the 80s, it was this sans serif, kind of unusual, blocky typography. And then technology evolved, and they went totally mad with their with the N64 version. They had a lot more freedom to be creative. And then they sort of went, in the 2000s, they went back to their original, they almost went back kind of retro style with an update of the characters, but they've brought the old logo back, which is quite cool. And then this is the latest Mario game, I think, in 2018, which is Super Mario Odyssey. And they've gone almost back to the N64 version, which is just great to see the evolution of typography and how you go back on each other. And, when N64 version started to feel a bit retro, they went back to that as well. So yeah, that's how I got into typography, really. I didn't realize it until later, but that was going to be one of the focuses of my career. I'm just going to leave you with this on here, just to summarize. What I want you to look for within your world now is typography. Just look at everything, and you'll start to notice that there's lots of typography out there. And this is a great poster that sort of says, as you can probably read, bad typography is everywhere, which is a sort of thing that everybody knows about typography. You only notice it when it's really bad. And then good typography is invisible. And what they're saying with that is that if typography is functional and it's really great, you don't notice it. You just look at it, and it just becomes part of the process of interacting with that object. So that's what we're saying about good typography is invisible, and bad typography is very noticeable. So it's everywhere. You will notice it everywhere. And just lastly, what I want you to do is we're going to be sending over. If you do send some images over, I'd love to see them. But what I'd really like is if you could almost create words, or create some with your ones you've taken pictures of today. If you say you made an F and a S, well, what about if you could create an A and a T as well, and just create the word fast, or and then ping that across to us. We'd love to see what you've been doing whilst I've been chatting through. And I know I've gone a little bit over my time actually, but I do waffle on a little bit. But I'd love to see what you've been up to. I'd love, if you've managed to send anything through. But I don't know, have you had anything, Tom, or not?
We haven't had anything just yet, but we've unfortunately run out of time on the session for now. But if anyone does have anything that you'd like to send over to us, that's student.recruitment@nua.ac.uk or @NorwichUniArts. We'd love to have a little look and kind of critique it, and also give you maybe a bit of advice for portfolios as well, because this is the type of thing that's perfect for putting in a portfolio application for university. Other than that, Jamie, thank you so much for this workshop. It's been proper interesting and a really great hands-on activity to do. And we hope to see you all again for another activity with us, perhaps next week or over the summer as well. Thank you very much. And
yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, really enjoyed it.
Happy birthday, Jamie.
Cheers. See you later.
Yeah, thank you.